Despotism is a form of government in which a single entity rules with absolute power. That entity may be an individual, as in an autocracy, or it may be a group, as in an oligarchy. The word despotism means to rule in the fashion of a despot, and does not necessarily require a singular despot, an individual. Despot comes from the Greek despots, which roughly means master, or one with power, and it has been used to translate a wide variety of titles and positions. It was used to describe the unlimited power and authority of the pharaohs of Egypt, employed in the Byzantine court as a title of nobility, used by the rulers of Byzantine vassal states, and adopted as a title of the Byzantine emperors. Thus, despot is found to have different meanings and interpretations at various times in history and cannot be described by a single definition. This is similar to the other Greek titles basileus and autocrator, which, along with despot, have been used at various times to describe everything from a local chieftain to a simple ruler, king or emperor. Colloquially, despot has been applied pejoratively to a person, particularly a head of state or government, who abuses their power and authority to oppress their people, subjects or subordinates. In this sense, it is similar to the pejorative connotations that have likewise arisen with the term tyrant. Dictator has also developed nearly similar pejorative connotations. Ancient Greece and Ancient Rome. Of all the ancient Greeks, Aristotle was perhaps the most influential promoter of the concept of Oriental despotism. His student, Alexander the Great, who conquered Persia, ruled by the despotic Darius III, last king of the Achaemenid dynasty. Aristotle asserted that Oriental despotism is based not on force, but on consent. Hence, fear cannot be said to be its motive force. Instead, the power of the despot master feeds upon the servile nature of those enslaved. Among Greek society, a man is free, capable of holding office and ruling and being ruled. Among the barbarians, all are slaves by nature. Another difference Aristotle espoused was based on climates. He observed that the peoples of cold countries, especially those of Europe, are full of spirit, but deficient in skill and intelligence, and that the peoples of Asia, although endowed with skill and intelligence, are deficient in spirit, and hence are subjected to slavery. Possessing both spirit and intelligence, the Greeks are free to govern all other peoples. For the historian Herodotus, it is the way of the Orient to be ruled by autocrats, and, even though Oriental, the character faults of despots are no more pronounced than the ordinary man's, but they are given much greater opportunity for indulgence. The story of Croesus of Lydia is a case in point. Leading up to Alexander's expansion into Asia, most Greeks were repelled by the Oriental notion of a sun king, and the divine law that Oriental societies accepted. Herodotus's version of history advocated a society where men became free when they consented lawfully to the social contract of their respective city-state. Edward Gibbon suggested that the increasing use of Oriental-style despotism by the Roman emperors was a major factor in the fall of the Roman Empire, particularly from the reign of Elagabalus, as the attention of the new emperor was diverted by the most trifling amusements. He wasted many months in his luxurious progress from Syria to Italy, passed at Nicomedia his first winter after his victory, and deferred till the ensuing summer his triumphal entry into the capital. A faithful picture, however, which preceded his arrival, and was placed by his immediate order over the altar of victory in the Senate House, conveyed to the Romans the just but unworthy resemblance of his person and manners. He was drawn in his sacerdotal robes of silk and gold, after the loose-flowing fashion of the Medes and Phoenicians. His head was covered with a lofty tiara. His numerous collars and bracelets were adorned with gems of an inestimable value. His eyebrows were tinged with black, and his cheeks painted with an artificial red and white. The grave senators confessed with this eye, that, after having long experienced the stern tyranny of their own countrymen, Rome was at length humbled beneath the effeminate luxury of Oriental despotism. History. In its classical form, despotism is a state in which a single individual wields all the power and authority embodying the state, and everyone else is a subsidiary person. This form of despotism was common in the first forms of statehood and civilization. The Pharaoh of Egypt is exemplary of the classical despot. The word itself seems to have been coined by the opponents of Louis XIV of France in the 1690s, who applied the term despotisme to describe their monarch's somewhat free exercise of power. The word is ultimately Greek in origin, and in ancient Greek usage, a despot was technically a master who ruled in a household over those who were slaves or servants by nature. The term now implies tyrannical rule. Despotism can mean tyranny, or absolutism, or dictatorship. However, in enlightened absolutism, which came to prominence in 18th-century Europe, absolute monarchs used their authority to institute a number of reforms in the political systems and societies of their countries. This movement was quite probably triggered by the ideals of the Age of Enlightenment. The Enlightenment philosopher Montesquieu believed that despotism was an appropriate government for large states. Likewise, he believed that republics were suitable for small states and that monarchies were ideal for moderate-sized states. Although the word has a pejorative meaning nowadays, it was once a legitimate title of office in the Byzantine Empire. Just as the word Byzantine is often used in a pejorative way, so the word despot now has equally negative connotations. In fact, despot was an imperial title, first used under Manuel I Comnenus, who created it for his appointed heir Alexius Beacutele. According to Gayula Moravisic, this title was a simple translation of Beacutele's Hungarian title but other historians believe it comes from the ancient Greek despots. In the Orthodox liturgy, if celebrated in Greek, the priest is addressed by the deacon as despot. Even today, it was typically bestowed on sons-in-law and later sons of the emperor, and beginning in the 13th century, it was bestowed to foreign princes. The despot wore elaborate costumes similar to the emperors and had many privileges. Despots ruled over parts of the empire called despotates. The United States Declaration of Independence accused the British government of a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evincing a design to reduce the people under absolute despotism. Contrast with absolute monarchy. According to Montesquieu, the difference between absolute monarchy and despotism is that in the case of the monarchy, a single person governs with absolute power by fixed and established laws, whereas a despot governs by his or her own will and caprice. Marxist ontology. In Marxist ontology, Oriental despotism is the quality of the large cities of the Middle East and Asia, which would not have been truly independent, mainly due to their geographical location. The premise, according to Marx, is that there existed some forms of state, which were ruled by tribute-collecting despots based on the system of production-property relations. Described as Asiatic mode of production, Oriental despotism is, thus, the political superstructure that was developed in succession. It was explained to have prevented states from progressing, or, as Marx said, Asia fell asleep in history. Dynasties might have changed, but overall the structure of the state remained the same, until an outside force artificially enforces progressive reforms within such socio-economic formations, the most obvious of which being the agrarian-based empires of ancient Egypt and China. An absolute ruler farmed out the right to collect tribute from peasant villages to a hierarchy of provincial petty officials, who also had responsibility for organizing the construction and maintenance of extensive irrigation works, upon which agricultural production was dependent. Extorting tribute from village communities became the universal mode of enrichment by the ruling class of military priestly nobles.